January 1961. Somewhere in the Congolese bush, a man opens a barrel of sulfuric acid. He has a saw, he has an axe, he has 200 liters of concentrate, and 3 bodies that need to disappear. By morning, not a bone left, just ash pressed into red African dirt. But this story doesn't start in the bush. It starts in a shared apartment in Brussels. 2 men, 1 dream, 1 country. One of them would give a speech that made a king turn white. The other would pick up a phone and sell his best friend to the CIA. And 62 years later, someone returned his teeth. Patrice Lumumba, postal clerk, self-taught, read Voltaire by candlelight. By 25, the most dangerous speaker in the Belgian Congo. Not because he was loud, because he was right. And standing right behind him, Joseph Mobutu, former sergeant, journalist, brilliantly smart. Lumumba saw a partner. They shared an apartment in Brussels. Same table, same dream. And when Congo became free, June 30th, 1960, Lumumba became the first elected prime minister in Congo's history. His first official act, he looked the Belgian king in the face and said what 80 years of colonialism really looked like. We knew the whip, the forced labor, and then Lumumba turned to his closest man, his friend, and gave him control of the army. That friend was Mobutu. Remember that. Lumumba governed like a man on fire. He spoke without notes. Crowds walked from villages for days just to hear him. In 2 months, he united more tribes than Belgium managed in 80 years. But 2 months, that's all he got. 60 days to build a country from nothing, with a colonial skeleton and an army that hadn't been paid. When the army mutinied, when Katanga seceded, when the Belgians sent troops back in, Lumumba did something the West could not forgive. He asked the Soviets for help. Not because he was a communist, he wasn't. The UN said wait, the Americans said no, Moscow said yes. And in Washington, Allen Dulles, head of the CIA, called Lumumba Africa's Castro. Remember that. Dulles would come back to this story with cobra venom and a tube of toothpaste. Mobutu, the man who waited. While Lumumba burned through allies and sleep, Mobutu was having quiet dinners with a CIA station chief named Larry Devlin. Devlin saw what Lumumba missed, an ambitious colonel with a talent for patience. Mobutu asked for one thing, money. Not for himself, for the soldiers, because the man who pays the army owns the army. September 14th, 1960, Mobutu walked into a radio station and announced that the army had neutralized all politicians. The man who shared his apartment had just stolen his country. Now, you might think this is where it gets dark. It hasn't even started. Mobutu had 32 years, and he used every one. He renamed the country Zaire, renamed the river, the currency, the cities, banned Christian names, 5 years in prison if you kept yours, banned suits, replaced them with his own uniform. Every night, on state television, his face descended from heavenly clouds. Not a metaphor, literally. He threw the most expensive party in history, paid Muhammad Ali and George Foreman $5 million each to fight in his country, while his people couldn't afford bread. He chartered a Concorde, the supersonic jet, for his wife's shopping trips to Paris. The Concorde crossed the Atlantic in 3 hours. In Lubumbashi, mothers waited 3 days for aspirin. Soldiers had no pay, so they robbed the people they protected. The economy collapsed to 10%. Inflation, 4,000%. He stole an estimated $5 billion, equal to the entire foreign debt of his own country. But even a man who steals billions eventually runs out of friends. But before the billions, before the Concorde, before the palace in the jungle, there was the man who made it all possible, and what they did to him. Remember what Dulles sent to Leopoldville? a biochemist named Sidney Gottlieb flew in with cobra venom in a tube of toothpaste. Direct order from President Eisenhower. The plan failed. The poison broke down in the heat, but it didn't matter. Mobutu's men got there first. November 60, Lumumba escapes house arrest, runs for Stanleyville, and the army he built hunts him down. They catch him at the Sankudu River, dragged back in chains, beaten before cameras. They force him to eat his own speeches, page by page. From his cell, he writes one last letter to his wife Pauline. Whether I am dead or alive, free or in prison, it is not my person that counts. History will one day have its say. January 17th, 1961. They put him on a plane. The guards beat them with rifle butts for hours. So badly, the pilot told them to stop because the shaking threatened to crash the plane. That night, outside Elizabethville, 3 men in the headlights of government cars. Belgian officers watched. Katangan ministers watched. Lumumba refused the blindfold. He was the last to be shot. He was 35. 4 days later, a Belgian officer named Soot got the assignment. 200 liters of concentrated sulfuric acid. They dug up the bodies, cut them apart, dropped them piece by piece into barrels. When the acid ran out, they burned the rest. Not a fingerprint, not a tooth, not a bone. Except Soot kept something. Gold teeth pulled from the shattered skull with pliers, kept in a pillbox in Flanders for 40 years. He called them his hunting trophies. So where did they end? Lumumba, 35, shot in the dark, dissolved in acid. No grave, no bones, no body. Just a gold tooth in a Belgian pillbox. Mobutu, 32 years of absolute power, 5 billion in Swiss banks, a Concorde for shopping, a palace in the jungle. And in 1997, his own army stopped fighting. The Cold War was over. The Saya didn't need him anymore. He fled his own country with advanced cancer, died in Morocco in a borrowed room. 2 men who shared a table, a dream, and an army. Lumumba died in chains, but wrote a letter that became scripture. Mobutu died in silk, but no country would take his call. Lumumba ruled for 60 days. Streets, schools, and airports carry his name across Africa. Mobutu ruled for 32 years. His name is a synonym for everything a leader should never be. So, who destroyed Congo? The man who made the call? The men who answered it? Or the empire that carved up the continent 80 years before either of them was born? You tell me. Next time, a man fails an exam, has a breakdown, decides he's the brother of Jesus Christ, and kills 20 million people.